Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Injured Time, show where I opine about other parts of soccer other than Division 3. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about some big news that came out this week. I'm sure everyone's seeing it, everyone's talking about it. The USL will institute promotion and relegation in 2028. And the crazy part is that this is just after 2 weeks after they announced that they were planning on launching a top division that will compete with MLS. I'm not sure that's the case, but I think that's the way a lot of folks are looking at it. But before I do get into that, I did want to comment on the U.S. national team's performance in the Nations Cup. I've seen a lot of videos, as I'm sure you have. A lot of folks have added infinitely more than I can, break down the players and all that kind of stuff. None of it really positive, maybe except for one or two players. Diego Luna comes to mind, deservedly so. But I'm just going to hone in on sort of what I said and what I've been thinking for quite a while, well before the national team decided to get rid of Greg Berhalter, or the Federation decided to get rid of Greg Berhalter. So, I saw head coach Mauricio Pochettino make some post-game comments about how this is the time you work out some issues and that, there's national teams don't play well, leading up to the World Cup. And unfortunately, I think we're well beyond that. And I don't think this game against Canada in particular, I would say Panama as well, but I'm going to just hone in on Canada. I would say that wasn't a game for experimentation. I don't think where you experiment on the system or you're just testing out players and all that kind of stuff. And even that being the case, it didn't even look like an experiment to me or testing those different aspects of the game. And unfortunately, the most I could come up with, and probably the most insightful thoughts that I had, and it stops me from taking deeper dives into an actual game. And I posted it on Exeter, and you could see it here. And I just wrote pretty simply, let's face it, I think this has been something, like I said, for a long time. We're not good. We haven't been good for a while, and we won't be good for any time soon. I think that sums up my feeling. Like we've been reigning in mediocrity for quite some time. I think we're going to be mediocre to bad for the foreseeable future. I just don't see the players making anything of their opportunity to play for the national team, right or wrong. I don't pretend to know. I'm not talking to the players or the coaches and understanding that. And is there some dynamic with Pochettino that makes it difficult? But then that dynamic was the same with Berhalter. We're going back some time here, so I just don't think that there's a quick solution to any of this. And I'm not sure I could add anything any more insightful or relevant to that. The only thing that I go back to, and I've been saying for a while, and there's a section of the fan base that loves to say, hey, MLS bad, Europe good, go to Europe, you'll learn, you'll train, you'll be in, you'll have to fight for your job, all that kind of stuff. And I kind of look at it a little bit differently, and I have said this before, so it shouldn't be controversial. I think the thing that's probably having the biggest impact on the players we are producing, that at some degree or another sort of work their way through the system that ultimately leads to MLS, or before they get to MLS they go to Europe. But I will say, in the case of MLS, I think we have to talk about the declining role of American players in Major League Soccer. I did a quick study. It's not scientific, and I'm sure um, these numbers are might are could vary a little bit. But back in 2006, I found that the average MLS roster had about 70% of their roster were American players, U.S. players, players who were candidates for the national team. And I'm not saying candidates for the national team who, because their parent, you had a parent, or no, these were U.S. players. Um, and now, if you look at Major League Soccer rosters, they only represent about 30% of the roster. In fact, if you go back roughly, give or take, rosters had between, to start back in 1996 maybe, they had between 13, 17 U.S. players, American players. That number has never changed. So what has changed is that the rosters have expanded dramatically. So in 1996, the rosters were 22 players, and now we're up to, I think it's 46. Don't quote me on that, but it's 45, 46, somewhere in that range. But but we still only have 15 U.S. based players, and I think that diminishing role, the centrality of the American player, I think reflects itself in the players who have gone to Europe, who, all due respect, they're doing something very hard. And maybe you could argue, Christian Pulisic, maybe. These are bid players, replaceable players at um, at major clubs. Like, they're not the designated player. They are not the top player at their club, that they can't be replaced. They can easily be replaced by someone else. So I think ultimately that all leads to a recipe for uninspiring performances. And you know, I'll just say, contrary to what a bunch of folks are saying, promotion and relegation does not fix this. It doesn't. It doesn't. Which leads me to the news from the United Soccer League, USL, that announced on Tuesday of last week that I'll quote, USL announced today that a super majority, not a majority, a super majority of club owners voted to implement a promotion and relegation system, marking a groundbreaking decision that will reshape the future of professional soccer in the United States. I mean, I'll just say, I think probably the most significant thing is that the Overton window on this has shifted. But aside from the fact that supermajority could mean half plus one, I mean, we don't know what a supermajority means within their club owners. We don't know what that looks like. Sounds pretty interesting to me. And if it's to believed, I think it sounds like USL is jumping headfirst and adopting promotion and relegation across all divisions. It doesn't even throw out the caveat that there'll be some sort of adjustment period, like there'll be no relegation, there's only promotion for 2 years or 3 years. I don't know, certain rules to make it a little bit, you sort of work your way into a full promotion and relegation scenario. But I think probably the biggest thing is that there's no details, which is can be expected because hey, this is 3 years out, and so I'm sure they're thinking they have 3 years to figure it out. Okay, to start, I'll just say what I think is probably the most interesting, maybe the best thing about the announcement coming out of USL is that the Overton window on this may have shifted. If you don't know what the Overton window is, according to Wikipedia, it's a range of subjects and arguments politically acceptable to the mainstream population at a given time. It's also known as the window of discourse. The key is that this window changes over time. It can shift or move, and it's just an evolution of values and norms and sort of the conversations that we have. And so I think this applies to promotion and relegation, where I don't necessarily think it was ever really on the table as a discussion until, hey, now USL making a commitment, supposedly, to do promotion and relegation. Not that it means much, but at least, we'll have to wait and see how it all materializes. But I do think probably the biggest benefit is that maybe, just maybe, we could have a much more substantive discussion around what promotion and relegation looks like rather than, the happy talk that keyboard warriors on Exeter engage in. I do think the snap responses, so it comes out and everybody's ecstatic, the immediate, has been really positive. I do think the pro rel warriors out there, we're quick to remind everyone how the announcement is not about creating an open pyramid, right? USL effectively operates in a closed way, the way Major League Soccer does. But, they were out there basically saying as much, hey, this is not really promotion and relegation. But I do think this is the sort of thing you can expect from people so invested in the idea of promotion and relegation that actually trying to implement it is never quite up to their standards. It's never, right? They're revolutionaries in a way, right? That their ideal is what they're battling for, and anything else comes up short is not worthwhile. And they know nothing. As a result, they know nothing else. So aside from those folks, I think the other thing people have been asking is, how does MLS react? I'll just say if they do. I'm not sure they will. There really is no need at this moment, I think, for Major League Soccer to do anything other than continue along its path, like it or not, to do what it's doing. I think USL, with its announcement, is trying to take the mantle of being a disruptor. But until it actually implements promotion and relegation, I think MLS can sit back and watch. And I think for a very simple reason, like it or not, MLS, all in. If you look at Major League Soccer, it's $1 billion business, right? Between the clubs and the 30 clubs and the league and the TV and all that stuff, it's $30 billion. It's a $1 billion business. Probably multiple billions, 2 billion. I don't even know what the number is, but USL is only a fraction of that. So, if anything, just nipping at the heels. It's not. I don't think there's much to do for MLS other than, like I said, just sit back and watch. I do think I go back to numbers and I try to sort of reduce things down to how the mechanics of this would work. Like, hey, I'm a big fan of promotion and relegation, but it's very hard. It's not an easy thing to do to just sort of, hey, tomorrow turn on a switch. So, the obvious things, especially in the United States, that sort of pop into my mind is, about club finances. And in particular, how does a club operate if it gets relegated? If you look at most of the other leagues with promotion and relegation in an open system, there's some sort of payments to relegated teams, some sort of revenue share. in a lot of instances, a lot of governmental support. I go back to, Wrexham gets $1 million plus from the town of Wrexham. Like, so there's those things, and because on its own, relegation, as was proven, I think it was back in the 80s and 90s, relegation has a very serious detrimental impact on not only on the clubs but also the communities, right? It just the way it is. So there's a whole system in place to sort of prop up these teams so that they can ease into their new way of being a demoted team. I do think, and I go back to this, and I don't think it's changed. I really don't. I think there's it's gotten better. I don't know about US and the USL maybe, but the one of the key drivers, if not the key driver for club soccer in the United States, relies on one single thing, and that is attendance. When there's not lucrative TV contracts, which is why the Apple deal with MLS was such a big deal, or some broad revenue sharing within a league, the success or failure of a club is still determined at the gate. If it can't draw, people don't show up. I call them irrelevant. If a team is irrelevant and nobody wants to go watch them, it doesn't matter promotion and relegation or anything. It's just not going to survive. Maybe having promotion and relegation drives attendance, but we won't know until that actually happens, right? And look, there's something to be said about, there's excitement on both ends of the table, but a lot of those games, you don't think of those being promotion and relegation games until you're literally fighting at the bottom to stay up or to go be promoted. That's when it gets really, really exciting. There's a lot more games that get played that, yes, there's implications to them, but do they carry the same weight and that excitement? I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. You really don't give it much thought. Games become important to win because you don't want to be in the position of being in the relegation zone, but you get my point. So a lot of the promotion and relegation questions that some of us have been bringing up, not to say that these are total obstacles, like insurmountable obstacles, but really do need to be addressed. I do think there is something to be said where in the current model where somebody like in USL, I think it's the ways operates the same. Well, like you have a piece of the pie with the league, right? You don't just have a club, you have a piece of the league. In Major League Soccer, that is 100% the way it works, right? You get a piece of the league and then you get the club. It's not the other way around. So I think that sort of thing just needs to be, those things still need to be determined, still need to be hashed out, because the worst thing that could happen is if USL introduces promotion and relegation, and in the first year, second year, third year, teams that get dropped to the lower division, they suddenly find themselves having to fold or go out of business because of it. So, and we can all whistle past the graveyard if you like, but I'm just trying to be as realistic and eyes wide open as. I do think the biggest issue, considering both announcements by USL, both the first being they were going to launch a new Division One, sort of compete with MLS directly head to head, if you can call it that. And then a week or two later, or a month later, the promotion and relegation announcement. I do think we have to apply the Highlander principle. all right, or what I call the Highlander principle, and that is, from my seat, there can be only one. Right? I don't think USL will be able to pull off the launch of Division One and implement promotion and relegation. First of all, I think that is a very, very complicated thing to do in the next 3 years for a whole host of logistical reasons and all the organizational needs and all that stuff, and can that be done? These are two very large things. The second one, and the obvious question, I think, is, if I'm leading an investment group that's looking to get a team in this newly created Division One, why would I do so now when for half or a quarter of the cost I can just do the same by investing in USL Championship or League One or one of the existing ones where I don't have to outlay as much for that, and my risk is that much greater. And why is it that much greater? Well, how would you like to be invested in Division One, and then within the first year, you're relegated? You just spent, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 million, or whatever the number is, to be in Division One, and within a year you're relegated. And what does that do to investment dollars? I get it sounds glamorous, but investment groups don't succeed by investing in things that could conceivably lose them money. So, what I do think it does, and I think it's interesting, I think the tandem announcements, I do think it drives interest in the USL and for future investors. I don't have a doubt of that. Which maybe that's the point. Maybe the point isn't promotion and relegation or Division One. Maybe it's, hey, how can we drive investors, larger investors, maybe overseas investors, to want to come talk to us, USL, instead of talking to Major League Soccer and investing in a club that for $500 million when you can do it for a fraction of the cost. Like I said, maybe that's the point, and that's fair. I'm okay with that. But finally, I'll just say, don't take this as I don't want USL to succeed and figure out the promotion and relegation conundrum, right? Like, I think it's a very hard thing to sort out in the modern game, in the way it's the way we've structured our sports here in the United States. I just think outside of the announcement, hey, great, and there was much rejoicing, the devil's going to be in the details, and those details won't be available for some time, unfortunately. So I think I'll just leave it at that. But I'm trying to think of something positive to say. I start with the national team, and then here I am with promotion and relegation. But I will agree with some of the many commentators at this point. I do think if a big if USL succeeds and figures out promotion and relegation for its across all of its leagues, including a Division One, that is a game changer, and it will force Major League Soccer to do something. Now, I'm one of those crazies who thinks that maybe you should do what we should do, an episode on Injured Time, on what a merger between Major League Soccer and USL would look like. But I'll leave that for another time, for other folks to opine. But that's it for me today. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, feel free to comment or shoot me an email. Love the back and forth banter. Comment down below. You can shoot me an email. I'm an open book. So thanks, and hopefully we'll see you next time on another episode of Injured Time. All right. Talk soon.